want to talk about a franchise that I feel like doesn't get a lot of love, and that's the Indiana Pacers. I know they're kind of in a down year, but typically they normally go to the playoffs each and every year. They still may go to the playoffs this year, but I want to talk about their franchise kind of being a pillar to success for young talent. Like we look at Sabonis, we know what he's about, and we look at historically when they drafted Paul George, and Paul George became a guy that really developed his game from and went from coming in very raw and then coming in, becoming an all-star, and then coming in and eventually leaving to become a superstar. And then they took on Victor Oladipo for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He came in, and this was a guy that got drafted with the Orlando Magic, needed a fresh change of scenery. Things didn't really work out in Orlando for his overall development, and he really didn't reach his full potential there. He went to Oklahoma City, played the role with Russell Westbrook being the second best player on that team, even though he was kind of up and down. And then he went to the Indiana Pacers, and they kind of believed in him, and he thrived in that situation until he got injured, unfortunately. But Victor Oladipo was the man in Indiana, and he was a guy who was leading them to playoffs, and he was a guy that took LeBron James in the first round and the Cleveland Cavaliers to a tough 7-game series. So the Indiana Pacers, the way they draft, either they draft players and they develop. If you look at Sabonis, if you look at Paul George, they're really great at doing that. Or they bring on guys who has loads of potential and kind of like untapped potential, and then they bring them into their teams and their team and their organization, and they help them thrive. They help them develop. I'm looking at the same situation that's kind of similar with Caris LeVert. He's averaging 18 points right now, 5 assists. We know they're fighting for a playoff spot right now in the Eastern Conference. And we know he came back because of what happened with him getting traded, and they found that he had something wrong with him. And then it was a blessing that he got traded, and the Indiana Pacers found out those issues, and he was able to take care of those issues. And now he's averaging 18 and 5 right now, and kind of just really having this filling out process. And also, we look at T.J. Warren, who's missed an entire year as well, and we saw T.J. Warren, what he did in the bubble as well. And he's always been an underrated player. But the Pacers just have a great organization when it comes to like getting the most out of their players, or drafting their players and developing them into all-stars and superstars, or taking on players with untapped potential. You may not see it this year, but you're definitely going to see it next year. I really feel like the Indiana Pacers are going to really give the keys to Caris LeVert because he's that talented. The only thing about Caris LeVert has always been his health issues. But with Sabonis and Caris LeVert going forward in the future, I feel like don't be surprised next year when you see Caris LeVert averaging between 23 to 24 to 25 points per game and being mentioned as a all-star type of player, an all-star caliber player, and probably maybe, depending on how they do in the following season, could be selected to an all-star game. He's that talented. He's that lethal. He's very smooth, very polished on the basketball court, can operate and score at every level on the basketball court. And he just needed a situation, and he's blessed to be in, because the Brooklyn situation, even though the Brooklyn Nets didn't have to trade for James Harden, if you have a chance to get James Harden, because they were already going to be lethal with Caris LeVert and Jared Allen, but if you have a chance to get James Harden, you do what you got to do. But this situation of Caris LeVert being in Indiana is going to help set him up for the long run. I believe it's going to allow him to kind of reach his unlimited potential and kind of be this all-star, borderline all-star caliber player, or all-star caliber player in the future. And the Indiana Pacers have done this countless and countless of times, and nobody really talks about their franchise being a pillar of success for drafting players and having them become all-stars, or taking on players with a lot of potential and developing them and allowing them to reach their full potential. And I just want to shout out the Indiana Pacers because I just feel like it kind of goes unnoticed. Now, I will say with the Indiana Pacers, what tends to happen is that they have these players that are really great, and they either develop like a Sabonis, like a Paul George, or they get on it. They come. Here comes Victor Oladipo, and here comes Caris LeVert, and these guys become all-stars. And then what happens is it's kind of like they never get they never take the next step and get the other right pieces to help those guys succeed when it comes to going from, making it to the first round of playoffs and being a viable contender. Now, we know Paul George during that time, they had, they was competing for Eastern Conference, and who knows, the Miami Heat Big Three never would have existed. They could have gone to the finals, but it just seems like, other than that situation, it just seems like a lot of times they have trouble because they're a smaller market. Nobody really wants to come to Indiana, so they got to find these key diamonds, these diamonds in the rough, and they kind of got to find them and kind of, let them flourish. So but it's hard for them to find that next player that can, go along with their superstars in a Sabonis or a Karis LeVert or Oladipo or a Paul George. So that can be a challenging situation, but this is a franchise that just doesn't get talked about a lot of times because they're in a small market, of course. But I just want to shout out the Indiana Pacers for, being that type of organization where they're allowing guys to flourish and allowing guys to reach their full potential.